Hello, I'm Doug Brunke. I'm here with Matt Salmon. Matt is the Vice President of Government Affairs at ASU. He's lived in Taiwan. He's a five-time U.S. Congressman. I think during those years was the only Mandarin-speaking leader in the House at the time. He has played an instrumental role in a number of pieces of legislation related to both China and Taiwan. He's also led many delegations. He's an expert on Taiwan and China, and we're just really lucky, Matt, to have you here today. Thank you for taking some time. Is there anything that you'd like to
Thank you,
say
Doug.
before we get started?
No, I'm just really pleased to be here, and I think the topic is very timely and incredibly important.
Lot going on in the world, and as I mentioned to you, I noticed lots of noise about what might China do if this or that and what's going on. And so I thought it would be very helpful to bring in preeminent expert like yourself to the Semiconductor Summit here at Global Chamber. Could you let us know, just at a higher level, how do you view the relationship between China and Taiwan, and what should Americans and others around the world be thinking about that?
Well, it's a real dichotomy, the relationship. On one side, Taiwan is one of the largest investors in China's economy, and on the other side, the politics of Taiwan, especially in the last 20 years, have probably been to the China leaders like getting a root canal without Novocaine. They are very frustrated with the idea of an independent Taiwan. Let's, in order to understand it, I think you have to go back historically, to the 40s and the civil war that took place in China between the Communist Party and Chiang Kai-shek's party, the Kuomintang, and Mao, Chairman Mao was successful in defeating the Kuomintang led by Chiang Kai-shek, and Chiang Kai-shek took his forces with him to the island of Formosa, which was under Dutch control for the longest time. We now know it today as Taiwan, and populated Taiwan. So while a lot of the folks that are in Taiwan are indigenous peoples and folks that would be considered native to Taiwan, a significant portion, probably upwards of 50%, are people that came with Chiang Kai-shek during that exodus. And since that time, up until 1979, when Taiwan was first really established as an independent nation back then, it was really under a very autocratic form of government. In fact, I lived there from 1977 to 1979. And when I lived there, Chiang Kai-shek's son was the president of Taiwan, and it was handed down, the leadership was handed down to the bloodline. It wasn't until 1995 when or 1994, when the very first freely elected president of Taiwan, Lee Teng-hui, was actually elected. And in 1979, Jimmy Carter severed diplomatic ties with Taiwan to establish diplomatic relations with China. And from that point on, we in the United States established a one China policy, not recognizing Taiwan as an independent state anymore, but as a part of China. And that has had a lot of, ups and downs in our relationship with both Taiwan and China. Right on the heels of us severing diplomatic ties with China, or excuse me, with Taiwan, and implementing our diplomatic ties with China and adopting a one China policy. Right on the heels of that, in the Congress, our own Senator Barry Goldwater led the charge with the Taiwan Relations Act, which spelled out very, very clearly, though we don't have diplomatic ties right now with Taiwan per se, if there's any aggression toward Taiwan, the United States will be there to defend Taiwan. That was the essence of the Taiwan Relations Act. And then later on, President Reagan put forth his sixth communique proposal regarding Taiwan, even bolstering more that commitment to defend Taiwan. And every president since Carter has been very, very robust in sending a clear message to China that if you attack Taiwan, we're going to be there to defend them. The only time that has been somewhat breached was during the last campaign. President Trump, he hesitated on that and said, well, I'm not sure we would be there to defend Taiwan, which would be in complete contravention of the Taiwan Relations Act. So anyway, I will say that, having been a member of Congress, there's very, very few things anymore today that we find bipartisan support for. One of those is the Taiwan Relations Act and supporting and defending and standing side to side with Taiwan. So that was probably predicated back then when it started more just on a idea that their ideas on government are so much more in line with ours than China's are. But it's in recent years, it's even morphed into something some would say even more important. And that is the fact that when you get to the most sophisticated semiconductors in the world, 94% of them are manufactured in Taiwan. And so that, knowing how important semiconductors are to everything, especially the upcoming market of AI and all things AI, when you think about how important semiconductors are to everything that we do, it rivals oil as something that I think Americans are probably willing to go to war to protect. So I throw all that out there just as a kind of history. Every time I visited China, and I probably visited China upwards of 40 times during my 10 years in Congress, and every time we met with the president of China and his cabinet members, the issue of Taiwan was always front and center, and one of the first things that they wanted to talk about.
You bring up war, and there's been conversation about war and the possibility of China, given the importance and the stakes and their own feelings about the island. Do you think that there is imminent war, or is that something that we should be worried about in the short or the longer term?
I think it depends on who you talk to. We should always be concerned. Xi Jinping, the current president of China, is nothing like his 4 or 5 immediate predecessors. I think, when Deng Xiaoping decided that the economy was far more important to China than their communist ideology, he and the predecessors that immediately came after him, I think, moved in a direction that was far more about strengthening the economy in China as opposed to bolstering their, communist bona fides. I think Xi Jinping, who, like Vladimir Putin, has declared himself to be an eternal leader, is a dangerous, frightening man. I'll say that for the record.
As business leaders here in the room consider what they need to do from a business perspective, many are involved with the semiconductor industry, different parts of the supply chain, considering that dangerousness and considering the dynamics of the world. What would you leave with them to be thinking about for their business strategically relative to the global supply chain?
Well, for one thing, if you haven't, if it's something that you haven't done before, I would pursue it with a lot of study and a lot of help from people that have done this before. I wouldn't go it alone. That's first and foremost. If you have been doing it for years, you've seen a lot of things change. But one thing that hasn't changed, and no matter how much pressure we put on them, is the theft of intellectual property. And I think that if you're going to do business in China, manufacturing, marketing, whatever the case may be, if you're going to have a presence in China, I think you have to assume that your intellectual property is going to be stolen. You just have to walk in with eyes wide open. And those are and I'm not saying these things to scare people off, because China can't be neglected. You can't just act as if it doesn't exist. It's a big player in the world market, and in global trade. So it has to be dealt with. I understand that, but I think that you have to walk in with eyes in the back of your head, because there's going to be a constant onslaught of potential, corporate espionage. And I think you have to walk in with both eyes open. You have to assume that your intellectual property is going to be stolen.
What's your next step in the region? What are some of the things that you have coming up? What would you like to accomplish going forward? And what else would you like to leave the audience?
Well, I think that, I served two different stints in Congress. And I served in the 90s when a man named Jiang Zemin was the president of China, very, very much different than the current president, Xi Jinping, very much different. And I was a strong advocate at that time of permanent normal trade relations with China, PNTR. I was also a strong advocate of China's entry into the global operations, that oversee all world business, the world trade. But I really believe that Xi Jinping is a very, very different individual. He's very much more nostalgic for the old communist ways and the ways of Chairman Mao versus Deng Xiaoping and the immediate predecessors following him. And so we have to deal with China. We have to. They are a force to be reckoned with, economically, militarily, in every way, shape, and form. And I think that we ought to be trying to figure out ways to repair a lot of the damage that's been done. Because in the last 10 to 15 years, a lot of damage has been done to that relationship. And I don't know what the answers are. I think that, that Ronald Reagan's approach, peace through strength, especially with China, is one of the only things they recognize and understand. Kind of the good news is I've seen documents about war games that have been done in the region should, China attack Taiwan. And in almost every instance, China was unsuccessful. And so, I think that's good news. But I've got to tell you, if we ever entered into a military global conflict with China, head to head, even if we won, we'd lose. Do you know what I'm saying there? I'm saying that it would be, even if we won, it would be incredibly, incredibly painful. And so we better be figuring out other ways.
What should we be doing? Is there anything that we should be doing to help?
Um, well, I think that for one thing, our commitment to a stronger military is incredibly important. Again, I reiterate what I said about peace through strength, and I believe that one of the only ways to be successful with China is if they believe that we're superior in a military way and that we're not afraid to use it. I hate to say that, but I think that it's one of the only things that they understand.
Matt Salmon, thank you so much for taking the time. A difficult challenge, big challenge, and yet business goes on. We need to keep moving forward, and so we need to do multiple things at the same time. And thank you for giving us some guidance and some thoughts to help steer us in the right direction. Really appreciate you. Thank you for your leadership.
Thank you, Doug. You take care.
Thank you. I think that's it. Appreciate your
All right.
time.
All right, Doug. Thanks a lot.
You bet. Take care.
Take care. All right. Bye bye.
Really good.